Now, the next individual to speak, due to a time scheduling conflict, would be David Levine, the CEO of American Sustainable Business Council. Is Mr. Levine? Okay. We also have Matt Finicello, owner of Rock Hill Bakehouse, Glen Falls. Are you here? Yes. And Michael Gaitis, owner Hounds on the Hudson. Is Lenny Hockman, Chief OO at Alternatives? Is he here? No? Okay.
Good morning.
Mr. Levine?
I'll just jump right in. Thank you for taking us up now. My name is David Levine, and I'm the CEO and co-founder of the American Sustainable Business Council, which is a council of business organizations and businesses that represent well over 110,000 businesses across the country, with many here in New York State. For us, looking at this issue, we believe that there's a strong business case to be made for raising the minimum wage. With far less buying power than it had, 4 decades ago, today's minimum wage means poverty for working families. And for us, then, it weakens consumer demand, the ability to actually buy the products from our businesses and to grow their business itself, and therefore weakens our economy as a whole. So for us, a higher minimum wage makes good business sense, actually. It puts money back in the hands of New Yorkers, who will put it right back into our businesses here locally throughout the state. It means buying needed goods and services. And research has shown that that minimum wage increases boost consumer spending, yes, substantially more than tax cuts have. And increasing minimum wage reduces the strain on our social safety net caused by inadequate wages, right? So all those funds that have to go to support folks that should be earning wages that could support them, and then in turn supporting the businesses here in the state as well. So decent wages at the bottom and benefit business beyond boosting consumer demand, because businesses see cost savings from lower employee turnover. The better they pay their employees, the less turnover there is. The reduced expenses with hiring and training new employees. So higher wages make happier employees, increase productivity, improve product quality, therefore consumer satisfaction, company reputation, and increase business. So for our businesses, raising the minimum wage will not only will not increase unemployment, right? So when we look at it, the first federal minimum wage was enacted during the Great Depression to lift wages, to alleviate poverty, and increase consumer purchasing power needed for job creation and economic recovery. So minimum wage increases play the same role today. The most rigorous studies of the impact of actual minimum wage increases show that they do not cause job losses, whether during periods of economic growth or during recessions. Our businesses, our business owners and executives support the proposed increase. For us, this makes good business sense to our businesses, our workforce, our communities, and our state. So I thank you for your time. Happy to supply case studies of real-world businesses that are in support of this throughout the state, or any other additional information. But thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
My name is Matt Funicello. Is that on?
Not yet.
Okay. Forgive me my quick first page. It's an analogy I think we need, and we're all going to hear a lot of numbers today, and probably already have heard them. I want to say that in the movie Platoon, an epic battle between good and evil is portrayed, and it's not between the Viet Cong and U.S. soldiers per se, but between the two main characters in the film, 2 U.S. sergeants, Barnes and Elias. Elias is a Christ figure. He takes care of his squad by nurturing them and teaching them how to survive as a group, so that the squad is collectively stronger, that it might better survive together. He has a strong moral compass And even in the middle of such a confusing and torturous situation as Vietnam, he's an arbiter of what is right and wrong, the only person willing to stand up to Sergeant Barnes. Barnes is a fearsome character. He's most concerned with his own personal survival, but he takes the full weight of the war on his own shoulders. He's determined to survive at all costs by sheer force of will. If his squad stays alive, it's often because of him, but he does nothing to make them collectively stronger. They're not really his concern. He's totally convinced that the war would be winnable if only he was allowed to take the gloves off and fight it, unhindered by morality. Love versus survival, idealism versus ruthlessness. Oliver Stone was very careful to not glorify either side of that battle or to oversimplify it, and in discussing the minimum wage and an increase in it, we should be careful too. Most of us can relate to this battle, to do what's in the collective good versus what is best for us individually. It's exactly the kind of question every engaged citizen should be asking him or herself every single day. There's a very real war against the American worker. It's been raging throughout our history. When we read about the revolution, it's easy to see the imperial injustice we were fighting against. When we read about the elimination of Native Americans and their culture, it's easy to identify with their fight for sovereignty. When we read about the abolitionists, it's easy to see we've always struggled with evil and avarice. When we read labor history, it's easy to see the war on the working poor has been around since day one. And I'm not just talking about of the United States either. The process of globalization, as manifested in NAFTA and GATT, makes it fairly easy to see that there are forces among us, very powerful and influential forces, that wish to impoverish workers. It's simple math. If 10 people are dying to get the same low-wage job, you can continue to drive down wages in the country. It's a very real race to the bottom, and we're seeing the economic impact of this kind of thinking right now as our manufacturing base is eroded and we're left as the last empire prior to the advent of global corporatism. Now, some of you are probably asking why I am here personally as a business owner to advocate for a living wage. And I'm here specifically because I'm a business owner. I employ 35 people. I pay every single one of them about $3 more per hour than I am forced to by law. Please do not make the mistake of thinking I'm alone in doing this. Corporate lobby groups like the NFIB or the Chamber of Commerce would have you all believe that a living wage will kill small business, the largest employer in New York State and the country. Unemployment will rise and you will all be blamed, and that's total nonsense. Every single study I've read on this issue shows that raising the minimum wage increases the buying power of the average worker, and in this manner it helps small business. It also aids with employee retention, which increases productivity. In New York State, it will also help us to prepare for 2014, when most workers will suddenly and magically be expected to pay for overpriced health insurance we can't afford today. As a small business owner, I always represent myself as an empowered worker, because I work very hard. I work long hours. I make a living, but I'm far from wealthy. I work side by side with my employees. I get up at 1 o'clock in the morning to bake bread. I pay myself the same wage that my workers make because I'm not above them. I am with them. Their plate is mine. They are my family. We all suffer together. I know that not every business owner behaves in this fashion or believes, as I do fervently, that a higher minimum wage would actually be good for everyone. But I think you'd be really surprised at how many of us are already paying far more than the minimum wage simply because we're rational and decent people. I canvassed a few friends who own businesses up in Glens Falls yesterday about a raise in the minimum wage. The two answers that stuck most in my head were a fellow restaurant owner who said, "How does anyone justify paying $7.25 an hour? It's cruel and it should be illegal." That's what she said. A fairly conservative friend of mine said it was largely irrelevant to him because you couldn't find anyone to work for minimum wage anyway, unless you made a practice of hiring incompetents, as he put it. I simply don't know any small business owners who pay their workers $7.25 an hour. It's real small business. I'm not talking about amusement parks and Walmart. I pay my wait staff $7.25 an hour because they make tips, and by law, I can pay them as little as $5 per hour. My minimum wage for all other employees is $10 an hour. Our average hourly rate is about $14.30 per hour. I'm forced to compete with larger companies who pay very little to their employees and who are constantly stealing taxpayer money from the collective in the form of IDA loans, bailouts, tax loopholes, payroll subsidies, and subsidized benefits for their workers who can be classified as working poor because they're paid $7.25 an hour.